We do have a real problem. I mean, look, there's the New York Times or somebody else reported recently that my phone was allegedly hacked by Chinese hackers. And so,
oh, no. What'd they get?
Yeah. I don't think anything.
Nothing? Come on, man. Got anything in there?
We'll find out, man. We'll find out.
Got any memes you probably should have shared with your friends?
Some offensive memes, and me telling my wife to get an extra gallon of milk at the grocery store. I mean, luckily I'm a pretty boring guy, so I don't think that they got really anything.
That's nice.
We'll find out.
It's nice to be boring if your phone gets hacked.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, it also, I mean, it's apparently they couldn't get the encrypted messages that were sent, so I'm pretty careful about making sure I use Signal and iMessage and all that stuff.
That's
anyway.
Great.
So, I mean, look, maybe they got some stuff. We'll find out eventually. I try not to worry too much about shit I can't control. But one thing that came up, by the way, in that, and I'll go back to your question, is about the grid. One thing that came up in that is the way that they hacked, and it was also President Trump's phone apparently too, the way that they hacked our phones is they used the backdoor telecom infrastructure that had been developed in the wake of the Patriot Act. And this is something that I think should be a much bigger part of the controversy over the Patriot Act is when the Patriot Act was passed, like AT&T, Verizon, they had to build all of these systems so that if somebody got a FISA warrant and could hack into a particular phone, the infrastructure actually existed. What I've been told is that infrastructure was used by this Chinese hacker organization called Salt Typhoon, and that's how they got into the Verizon network, and that's how they got into the AT&T network.
What a great name, by the way, Salt Typhoon.
It's a pretty badass name, right? If they have anything on me, I can't be too pissed off at them. At least they named themselves Salt Typhoon. But the answer to the question about the grid is, this is actually, it's one of these things where if we had a functional government, it's pretty easy to develop the systems. Because if you do like an EMP attack, right? Ron Johnson, who's a senator from Wisconsin, is really preoccupied with this. It doesn't take down the whole grid. What it really screws with is the power transformer system. So what we should have is basically a backup power transformer for every major system in the United States of America, just sitting in a warehouse that's turned off. And because it's turned off, it won't be affected by an EMP pulse. And then if there is an EMP attack, you just get those transformers to swap out the ones that were destroyed, and then the grid is back up and running. It's actually a scandal, I think, that the federal government has not just at one point, with all the money that we spend on defense and everything else, just said, we're going to spend $15 billion to buy enough power transformers to have a backup for every transformer in the country. We should do that.
Yeah, one of the things that Trump talked about that a lot of people probably weren't aware of was the damage that these wind turbines are doing to whales. I wasn't totally aware of it.
I had no idea until I watched your podcast with him.
I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't read about it until after I talked to him. And it's a real problem.
It's a very real problem.
And what a conundrum for people that are so-called environmentalists to think the wind is like the cleanest option when it's not. The turbines don't last. You can't recycle them.
It doesn't work in salt water in particular, which is what most of the world's water is. I think wind is the biggest scam out there. It's total bullshit.
It's also pollution. When I see those gigantic wind
tunnels, they're ugly.
They're gross.
They're ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought this, where were me and my wife? We used to be into road trips before we had a Secret Service detail. And we took a road trip, the good old days, man. We took a road trip through Kansas or Nebraska, or maybe it was Iowa. It was one of the, I mean, we went through all three of those states, but I can't remember where you just go for miles and miles and you see nothing but wind turbines. And it's like, this is beautiful American countryside that used to be green, rolling hills. And now you have these disgusting dystopian wind turbines. I'm sorry, they are ugly. I will die on this hill. They're ugly. I don't want them in American society.
And nuclear power plants are actually more efficient, safer. And you don't have the problem, like we think about the problems of nuclear waste, like they've kind of sorted a lot of those out. They haven't sorted out the problems of getting rid of these turbines.
No, they haven't. Not at all.
I have a buddy of mine who lives in South Texas, and I went to visit him, and you drive down there, and it's like an hour of turbines. They're everywhere. There's so many of them.
I can't stand that.
You just see them as like the sky is turning dark. You see these things just spinning. It just looks gross.
They kill the birds. They apparently kill the whale. They kill a lot of birds.
If you look underneath them, it's like bird graveyards. It's crazy.
It really is.
And it's clean. It's green. It's like we're brainwashed to think that these things somehow or another are beneficial because they're attached to this idea of being environmentally conscious.
Well, and I got the thought behind them, right? I understand why we were trying to turn. That's obviously a source of energy because you have wind blowing through. That's energy that we should capture, but we're just not that good at it with this,
it's
right?
Not very efficient.
Right. Just accept that it was a mistake. It's not that efficient. The political or the environmental costs are pretty significant. Solar, I think, is actually a little bit more reasonable because you can get a lot more of the power. They last a little bit longer. They're not nearly as ugly, and you can put them in places where people don't frankly want to live that much anyway, like in deserts and things like that.
Well, they do those roofs now. Like Tesla does a solar roof,
yeah,
which
the
is
solar
fantastic.
roofs that's a great way, right? That's just empty space. But wind, I think we just should say this was a failed experiment. We're going to stop subsidizing this, and if people want to have a wind turbine, great, but we're not going to build miles and miles of wind turbines anymore, at least not with taxpayer subsidy.
But I just hope people recognize that the trade-off is not worth it. Like, you're getting a little bit of electricity, you're really ruining the landscape, you're ruining the view, you're killing birds, you're messing up whales, and those things don't last that long, and then when you got to get rid of them, you got to put them in a landfill. Like, the whole thing's bananas.
It's totally bananas. And again, we focus on the carbon footprint thing, and we don't talk about the fact that there are these massive environmental hazards. That goes back to the distracted politics versus the real stuff. And we should be talking about the real environmental consequences of wind power.
It's one of those things that, again, is much like a religion, where you must stay with the doctrine. You must follow it by the word. Because if you step out of line and say, actually, when you look at these studies, it doesn't really show that the world is warming. It shows that over the last X amount of thousands of years, we're in a gradual cooling period. And that what's really terrifying is global cooling.
Yes.
Randall Carlson, who's an expert in asteroid collisions and the Younger Dryas impact theory, is a fascinating guy. But he says that the periods in history where we came very close to extinction are like when there's an ice age.
Yes.
Like, those are the most terrifying.
That's right.
When there's global warming, you just move to where it's not so warm, and that's what people have done forever. You got Bill Gates that's saying planting trees is not a solution to the carbon problem. Like,
wait a second.
This is so not true.
What seems so crazy.
It's so not true, and it's also historically, like, one of the craziest moments in history, in my opinion, is the Mongols and what the Mongols did in the 1200s. They lowered the carbon footprint of Earth because they killed so many people. They killed 10% of the population of Earth.
That is crazy.
And because of that, because they devastated these places and killed so many people, trees grew. More trees grew. And it lowered the carbon footprint.
Wow.
These places that had been overcome by agriculture were then reconsumed by nature.
Yeah.
And it lowered the carbon footprint of Earth.
Well, there is it raises the point, there's a fundamentally anti-human element of the radical environmental movement in the United States of America.
They're saying we have to reduce population. This is one. And when they say it with vaccines, you're like, slow down.
That's right.
Did you just say that out loud?
Shit, yes.
And then when you